Good day, Mr. Rodolfo Martinez. Our report is all about language and social variation. Social linguistic. Social linguistic is the study of language in relation to social factors, including differences of regional class, occupational dialect, gender differences, and bilingualism. Speech form of social identity. One person can give clue about their regional background using only the language. It can also give hints about their educational and occupational background as well. Basically, language indicates the membership of social groups. If one person using language formally and in a nice way, we can conclude that the person is from the higher class of our society. And if the person uses informal language, we can conclude that the person is from the lower class of the society. Speech community. Speech community is a term in social linguistics and linguistics anthropology used to describe a group of people who share the same language, speech characteristics, and ways of interpreting communication. Speech community is a group of people who share a set of norms and expectations regarding the use of language. Speech community is based on their age, gender, occupation, education, and ethnicity or race. In the Philippines, there's a lot of ethnic group who uses their own unique language. The example is our many ethno-linguistic nations such as Cebuano, Kapampangan, Ilocano, Waray-Waray, Tagalog, and many more. The relationship between language and society. The first one is the linguistic and anthropology. The interdisciplinary study of how language influences social life and study of language and culture. Linguistic anthropology is important because it explores how language shapes communication. It is important to know the cultural background of the people you interact with, their cultural beliefs and ideologies. The second one is language and sociology. Study of relations between language and society. Studies how society influences by language and deals with how an individual or group identity is established by language and has to do with who authorized to use the language. The third one is the language plus social psychology. Concentrates on the role of language in dynamics between individuals and their social world. Language can affect and be affected by both psychological and social variables. It deals with how language affects the personality, behavior, attitude of the individual that is being influenced by social groups. The social dialects is a variety of speech associated with a particular social class or occupational group within a society. These are the social classes: middle class, high middle class, low middle class, working class. Accent can define social class. For example, is how we pronounce the word 20. Many people, especially on the higher class, pronounce it as 20, but the people in the lower class pronounces 20. Educational and occupation. A personal dialect is idiolect, an individual way of speaking. However, we generally tend to sound like others with whom we share similar education background and occupation. Among those who leave the educational system at an early age, there is a general pattern of using certain forms that are relatively infrequent in the speech of those who go on complete college. Those who spend more time in educational system tend to have more features in their spoken language that derive from a lot of time spent in written language. They say that language and how you use language can indicate the educational and occupational background of one person. It is true, and you can see the evidence of it every single day. Educated people, when they socialize with others, they use language formally and in a decent way. You can notice that they speak fluently and with the class, especially in speaking English, because they spend more time in an educational system. The second one is occupation. You can observe that the people with good jobs, such as teachers, talks fluently. It is because their occupation affects the way they use language. As a professional, you need to speak nicely and socialize with others in a decent way to take care of your socioeconomic status. They speak different than the other who work in a local jobs. Next, William Labov. Who is William Labov? William Labov is an American linguist widely regarded as the founder of the discipline of variationist sociolinguistics. He conducted one of the earliest studies in sociolinguistics. He observed the place of occupation and the socioeconomic status by observing their pronunciation. He went to the different New York City department stores. The first one is the Manhattan Saks Fifth Avenue, an expensive upper middle class store. The next one is the Macy's, a less expensive middle class store. The third one is Escalane, a discount store frequented mainly by working class New Yorkers. He illustrates the social stratification of R in New York City department stores. The variance of phonological variable R is either presence or absence on post-vocalic. In the end of the study, Labov concluded that the higher the socioeconomic status of the female sales clerk, the more frequently she pronounces R than the other sales clerk.
Social markers. The use of this particular speech sound function as a social markers. Social markers conveyed through verbal and non-verbal that serves to identify individuals to the group where they belong. They also help to provide context for social organizations. For me, dialect is the most important language tools that reflects a social markers. This is also a way to see the difference between each other. For example, here in the Philippines, Filipinos speaks around 8 dialects. So, it is easy for us to know someone's region or tribes because of his or her dialect. Next is speech style and style shifting. The most basic distinction in speech style is between formal uses and informal uses. For formal style is when we pay more careful attention on how we're speaking. For informal style is when we pay less on how we're speaking. Style shifting refers to a single speaker changing style in response to context. In addition, speech style has formal and informal uses. Sometimes they are called careful style and the casual style. Prestige. Prestige describes the level of respect accorded a language or dialect as compared to that of other languages or dialect in a speech community. Prestige, the concept of prestige is closely tied to the idea of standard language. What is standard language? Standard language is the way to use language in official or formal situations, as in newspaper or public speaking. There are two types of prestige: overt prestige and covert prestige. What is overt prestige? Generally, overt prestige is recognized as better valued in the community, while covert prestige having positive but hidden value as much among the larger community. Next is speech accommodation. It's modifying speech style towards or away from the perceived style of the person being talked to. Speech accommodation, our speech style is not only a function of speakers' social class and attention to speak, but it also influenced by their perception of their listeners. Accommodation theory has been developed by the British language psychologist Howard Giles and others since the early 1970s. Giles developed the theory based on his accommodation theory of 1973. He is a professor of linguistics and psychology at the University of California, Santa Barbara. There are two concepts of accommodation. One is convergence, two is divergence. Convergence is towards the listener, while divergence is away from the listener. Is the way people use different words, spelling, or grammar talks or write differently to different people in different situations. Register is one of the factors that influence the speech style. A register contains jargons. Different registers are used in different contexts. One is situational, two is occupational, and three is topical. The example of situational is in church, occupational is among lawyers, and topical is talking about languages. Jargons refers to the technical vocabulary of a particular profession, group, or trade. Special word and phrase which are used by particular group of people, especially in their works, can be formal and informal depending on the profession of the group. Jargons is specialized vocabulary used by those inside established social groups, often defined by professional status. Slang. Slang or colloquial speech describes words or phrases that are used instead or more everyday terms among younger speakers and other groups with special interest. This is more typically among those who are outside established higher status group. Variety of language used by a restricted part of population, usually by people, teenager, less respectable groups. Slang usually means very informal language. Vernacular language. It is a general expression for a kind of social dialect typically spoken by a lower status group which is treated as a non-standard because of a marked differences from a social prestigious variety treated as the standard language. Generally refers to a language which has not been standardized or codified and which does not have official status. So this is our report about language and social variation.